Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Lauren and I am the Yoga and Fitness Program Coordinator at the McFetridge Sports Center. And today's Transition Tuesday video is based on the ways that you can move in a vinyasa. So specifically, we'll go over a modified Chaturanga, a Chaturanga where we lower all the way to the floor, and Ashtangasana. And there are lots of other transitions you can take. I'll be doing another video with more intense options, with different, more challenging ways to transition during a vinyasa or during a sun salutation. But today we're gonna move in the more modified ways that still take work but aren't necessarily inaccessible. So these are the more accessible versions for the general public. So backing up just one little step, taking a vinyasa. So a vinyasa is a general movement where we go from downward facing dog to plank. We lower down and then we take the back bend and we come back into downward facing dog. And in a vinyasa class or a slow flow class, a teacher might give you opportunities to take vinyasas, to take a chaturanga, to move with your breath and take whatever you need, and that's an option for you, is to take a vinyasa. But to take a vinyasa is not one set thing. There's still options and modifications and variations within that thing. So again, we'll go over 3 of them today. So we'll start with the modified Chaturanga. So Chaturanga Dandasana means 4-limbed staff pose, because in a Chaturanga, there are only 4 parts of you touching the floor. This is different from Ashtangasana, which is the other way to move through this transition. Ashtangasana means 8-limbed pose, so there's 8 parts of you touching the ground. So whenever you're in doubt, if there's more of you touching the floor, the pose is going to be easier. It means that there's less of your weight that is being held up by other parts, more of you is being supported by the floor, less of you needs to balance, less of you needs to engage. So if there's more of you on the floor, your muscles work a little less, so that might help you choose, do you want 4 parts of you touching the floor or 8 parts of you touching the floor? The 2 movements, the Chaturanga and the Ashtangasana, aren't really the same. One really isn't a substitute for the other. They do very different things, but it really all comes back to what feels best in your body. So all of them are ways to get more or less from plank down into a back bend, so that we've got that. So for all of these, more or less, we start in our downward facing dog in our Adho Mukha Svanasana. Feet about hip distance apart, hands about shoulder distance apart. We spread the fingers and push the hands down. We inhale, shift forward into plank for both of these. Now we're gonna start with the modified Chaturanga. So a modified Chaturanga would be where we drop our knees to the floor. Some teachers will tell you to keep the tops of your feet on the floor. I actually really don't care for that. I find that that tends to put a lot of pressure in the kneecap. So if you can deeply bend the knees, bring the heels to the backs of your thighs. One, you're gonna work your hamstrings. You're gonna feel the backs of your thighs working a little bit. And then you'll also feel that you'll roll off of your kneecaps and onto your femur, which is much more comfortable. So play with it, see what feels best, but this does not feel good in my knees, so I know that I bend my knees. Okay, so from this modified plank, you should feel your upper body and your chest and your abs working fairly hard. Now from the knees, here being on the knees, we still look down at the floor. The creases of the elbows point forward. We inhale. Exhale, bend at the elbows. The elbows will point back. The arms will slide alongside the body. You come all the way down onto the floor. Here is where you then let the tops of your feet come down. Keep the elbows in tight, and then you can come to whatever back bend you like. So you might lift a little, you might lift a lot. That's entirely your call, but you've got that option. So again, from a modified plank, we want to make sure that from the crown of the head to the knees are a straight line. So make sure that your hips are not flexing at all, that your hip flexors don't have a crease, that they're not shortening. Make sure that they're long, because when we start like this, we often sort of end in this weird, which sort of looks like Ashtangasana, you'll see in a moment, but we really want from the crown of the head to the knees to be a straight line. We bend at the elbows, keep them in tight, in tight, in tight, in tight. You should feel your triceps work. tops of the feet down, you lift to your back bend. So that's a modified Chaturanga Dandasana. And if you are new to yoga or just still sort of finding your way, that's how I would move. Anytime a teacher is saying to take a Chaturanga, take a vinyasa, something like that, I would take a modified Chaturanga on your knees, keeping the elbows in tight, the whole front of your body. Notice that it's a little hard because this shirt's a little bit bigger, but hopefully you can see that the front of my body all touches the ground at the same time. So I hover over the ground and then I allow myself to lower down and then lift. Okay, so that's sort of step one. If you're new to yoga, that's where I would start. If you've been doing that for a while and you think I need a little bit more of a challenge, you're gonna do this off of your knees and on your toes. So less of you touching the floor, it's gonna be a little harder, and this is where we really get into four-limbed staff pose. There's just four parts of you touching the floor, the two hands and the 2 feet. I suppose the 2 hands and the 2 knees was same sort of thing before, but now we're on our knees, now we're off our knees, on our toes. We've got to, again, make sure, this is really important for the safety of your shoulder. Speaking from personal experience, lots of people injure their shoulders when doing chaturangas, either too fast, too frequently, without giving too much thought, not very mindfully. So this is a movement, we should have started with this. This is a movement that a lot of people injure themselves on. It's not to say you should not do it, it's just to say that you should think while you're moving. That's really all it is. All that I'm asking is that you put a little thought, pause sort of as you do this movement, because this is a movement, again, sometimes in vinyasa classes that teachers will ask you to do this dozens of times. And so maybe those first 4 or 5, you're very mindful and very conscientious, but as the numbers grow and as you start to get physically tired, mentally tired, that sort of starts to waver the form. So we've just got to put in some thought. So that's what I really want to stress, is that all of these are okay to do. It's just a matter of paying attention and noticing how you feel. Okay. All right. So from a plank, from an upright plank with your hips up, knees up, creases of the elbows will point forward. You can have the feet hip distance or together. I guess I like them together. I never noticed I did that before. Creases of the elbows forward. You'll lower. Notice that from the crown of my head to my heels, I stay a straight line. I hover over the floor and then I come down. My whole body touches the ground at the same time. Then tops of the feet, and then you lift to your back bend, to whatever back bend you like. You could lift a little, you can lift a lot. But again, what's important to remember for the chaturanga is that the creases of the elbows point forward, not towards each other, because that's not good on your shoulder. Creases of the elbows forward, and you lower down slow, controlled mindfully and thoughtfully, with the elbows sliding in tight so you feel the work in your triceps and the backs of your arms. You'll also feel it in the front of the shoulders, in the anterior deltoids. Okay, so again, one more time, from a plank, you keep the elbows in tight, elbow pits facing forward, everything stays a strong long line. You lower all the way to the floor, everything touches the floor at the same time. Oftentimes with this movement, people sort of do this worm-like thing and then lift up. So doing that worm-like thing and then lifting, I would say it most likely will not hurt you, but it will not benefit you. So when you lower really slow, crown of the head to the heels, a long straight line, you are working hard. You're going to feel your core, you're going to feel your shoulders, you're going to feel the backs of your arms. When you do that sort of worm-like thing, you just let gravity do the work. You do not benefit at all. And we're taking that transition, we're taking that movement with the intention of building up strength in the upper body. So if you just let yourself do the worm, you are losing out on so many of the benefits. Again, you're not going to hurt yourself, but you might as well take a child's pose, honestly, or take something else, because you're also not benefiting in any way. So think about keeping your core engaged so that your hips don't just hang, your belly doesn't sag, that you stay that long straight line. And so this is the variation that I often take. Even though I can move through a very vigorous practice, I can do very challenging things, I suppose. All of that is subjective. But I got a little distracted because it's very subjective. What's challenging, what's easy. But in my practice, when I take vinyasas, this is the variation I do. From a high plank, I lower all the way to the floor, and then I take the back bend of my choice. It's not to say that that's the best option. There are so many options. Again, I've got another video coming on the more challenging options. But there's no pressure for you to do the most challenging thing ever. You do what feels good. And so whatever that means, maybe that means starting on the knees and lowering down. Maybe that means starting on the toes and lowering down. But either way, we want to make sure that the arms and the abs are engaged and working hard, because then we know that the lower back and the shoulders and the neck and other spaces are protected. That's really important too. Okay, so Ashtangasana, this is the third and final transition I'll show in this video. So those two were just both modifications for Chaturanga Dandasana, 4-limb staff pose. Now the next one is Ashtangasana, which means 8-limb staff pose. Or 8-limb staff pose. I think I might have added a word, but it definitely means 8. I know that. So in this one, there are 8 parts of you that are touching the floor, and it's a little funky. Usually when I teach this in a live class, there's a lot of chuckles and giggles because this is kind of a funky movement. So you might just want to watch if you've never seen Ashtangasana. So Ashtangasana, we really don't do very often. So you maybe never have heard it, never have seen it, and that's okay. I almost never teach it, but I do like students to know that they've got lots of options. So Ashtangasana you can use instead of Chaturanga, but it is not going to build strength in the same way. So that's a major thing to know. So just like doing the worm is not building any strength, this is not building nearly as much strength as a Chaturanga can if you are doing it well. But it doesn't mean that it's not as good. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just has different benefits and a different intention. So in yoga, things are generally not right and wrong. It's just about intention. Does it fit the intention? Does it not fit the intention? And so keep that in mind. But Ashtangasana we really don't use very often, but it is a very viable option if Chaturanga does not suit your body. All right, Ashtangasana. So we start in this plank because remember all of these, they all start from down dog, moving here. So we move here. Notice that there's 4 parts of my body touching the ground, but we want 8. So we're gonna drop the knees, that makes 6. We've gotta drop 2 more things. What will we drop? We're gonna drop the chest and the chin. This pose is often called knees, chest, chin pose. So knees, chest, chin, feet, and hands. This is where people usually laugh a little because this looks ridiculous. I know that. This is why I don't teach it, don't practice it. But again, doesn't mean it doesn't have merit. It certainly does. It's just really goofy. Okay, so from knees, chest, chin, here we are. Butt up in the air. You're feeling the stretch through the back. It actually feels pretty good. Chest is on the floor, chin is on the floor. We're looking forward. We push the hands into the floor, slide the chest forward so then you can very seamlessly come into your back bend. Now my mat, I use a jade mat, which is super, super, super sticky. So it's hard for me to do that movement. If I was using a different mat, maybe that movement would be a little easier, but that sort of pulling through, I can feel my chest and everything sort of be dragging and pulling, and so it just doesn't feel good for me on this mat. So it probably doesn't look very smooth either because it doesn't feel very smooth. But again, Ashtangasana, just one more time. So from this high plank, we drop the knees, we drop the chin and the chest, we look forward, and then we pull through to the back bend. So again, it does not build strength because you're not in that plank, you're not lowering down, keeping everything straight line. Everything staying a straight line is gonna be a little bit more challenging. It's gonna make you work harder in that Chaturanga as you lower, again, as opposed to sort of lowering like the worm. Notice in Ashtangasana, you're not lowering like the worm. It's not this sort of flopping wave-like motion of everything. It's very meticulous and thoughtful so that you can then slide through and really lift your chest and pull your heart forward. It sets you up. I would argue it sets you up for the opportunity for a little bit of a deeper back bend, and you are in a back bend when you're in it with your tuchus up in the air like that. You're in a little bit of a back bend, so it does a little bit more for that, less about the upper body strengthening. One is not better, one is not worse, they are just different, so you choose the one that suits you best. So we've gone over modified Chaturangas on the knees. Modifying Chaturanga is lowering all the way to the floor, and Ashtangasana. So those are the 3 options that I would offer to beginners. But if you're definitely a brand new beginner, I would probably start with the very first option, because Ashtangasana is really funky. And I'm not kidding, when I've taught this in the past, people sort of chuckle and laugh and think that I'm crazy, and I didn't make it up. It's one of the oldest poses. Some poses like reverse warrior, someone made that up in like the 1980s. Some of these poses are not ancient. Ashtangasana is one of them. It's a very, very old and traditional old school pose. So do with it what you will. Now you know how to do it. Now you know what it should look like, hopefully. I don't know how well I was doing it, but that's the idea. So just 2 different ways to move with different transitions and different intentions. So thank you for watching my Transition Tuesday video. Again, my name is Lauren James. I am the Yoga and Fitness Program Coordinator at the McFetridge Sports Center, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.